If you're in business, you've either dealt with some crazy crises or you're going to. It's just part of the job. That being the case, crisis management is one of the best skills you can get good at, so you can do your job. Today, we're going to explore some of the tactics and the mindsets so that you can start putting out fires more effectively. I'm Michael Orzabal.
I'm Chris Wood.
I'm Nate Tucker.
And this is Zero to Hero. Let's jump into it. So first up, I want to start off with this prompt to you guys. Can we define what a crisis is and maybe how it's different with the scale between minor mistake and crisis?
Yeah, I think a crisis can be defined as something that doesn't go how you want it to. I think there's definitely minor crises that don't really matter, and there's major crises that are like, if this doesn't go well, it could potentially ruin, hamper, close down the business. So, and there's everything in between. And it happens almost daily. If not daily, you're doing well, and you just have to get good at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely say like a crisis by our standards tends to be like something that stops the flow. Like anything that like puts an end to like productivity, or like Chris said, starts to like hamper it. Because like some of them can be like super small, like literally like in the case of McCaffrey, it could be like, we made someone the wrong drink. Like that's something where it messes up the flow. It can like stop people in their tracks for a second, but ideally you can fix it in like 3 minutes. Yep. Versus like you show up and all the milk is spoiled. That's a like, well, we gotta figure this out crisis that could take like, hours to fix.
Yeah, and today we've had all of this, including weather and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm curious if you would define what's like the crisis range and the minor problem range different now than when you started.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, tell me more about like what would freak you out then versus now where you're like, I just deal with that and this is now the crisis.
Well, I think part of crisis management is experience, and the more experience you have, the better you are at it, and the smaller deal it is. When Doug and I first opened Be Caffeinated, I mean, everything was new. So every time we messed up, it was the first time we messed up. And it's one of those things where you kind of build calluses, just like metaphorical calluses. And at this point, we're just kind of like, oh, that exploded? All right, who do we call? How do we like keep selling coffee? Oh, we can't? That sucks. How do we not close? Oh, we're going to close? That sucks. How can we try and salvage this? And it's just very like systematic and streamlined versus before it was like, oh my God, we're all gonna die, what's happening? And I can distinctly remember a few occasions where Doug and I just like had super big oopsies. The one that always sticks out to me, it was just me and him working at our Red Bank location. Half of our stuff was like bedside tables from his bedroom that were our tables, a refrigerator off of Craigslist. We had a stool, and we had gotten our Rembrandt's delivery in from the pastries, and we just had it sitting on a stool in the middle of the room, and we were super busy, and I was like trying to be fast, and I like bumped into Doug, and when I bounced off of him, I ran into the pastry box, and it just knocked over all of the pastries on the floor, and we just kind of like stared at him. And I looked at Doug, and he looked at me, and then we just looked down, and we're like, oh, crap. That sucks. Like, what do? You're not going to sell, like, floored Nutella croissants, and there weren't any other options. So we're just out of those pastries for the day. And you can either kind of kick yourself for it, or you can just move on. There was another situation way back when I was a barista at Java Mo's, where I was working by myself. Shouldn't have been. Was working by myself, had, like, 3 cars on each side of the drive-thrus. I went to restock whole milk, and like something happened where one of the gallons just like fell out of the fridge and just spilled everywhere. I just had my 2 gallons. I was looking at it, and then I just look up, and like out of a movie, there were 2 more that just like and just fell on. So there was just 3 gallons of milk all over the floor while I was there by myself with 3 cars on each side. And like a gallon is a lot. It doesn't look like a lot when it's in a container, but 3 gallons on a floor? No, sir. So I was like, and I was just like, okay, I'm just going to get through this line, and then I'll worry about the milk. And I did, and it was okay. And then my general manager got back and was like, hey, are you good? I was like, I'm not. I'm going to go on a walk. You're in charge, and also never leave me alone like this again. So yeah, it's just one of those things where you just build up that callus and experience, and you get better at managing it.
Yeah, I think I can speak from the perspective kind of the worker who's seen this development happen within Be Caffeinated and within other stuff that we do. We're very much like when we first started. I do think we had those moments, where the minor, what today we consider minor, but to me as like a worker felt huge. Where like those like customer like mess ups, or it'd be stuff like the spilt the milk situation, stuff like that. I definitely remember those like moments of, you hand out the Milka, and then you turn around and someone goes, "Hey, did you give that person their Chai-Hooligan?" And you're freaking out internally. And like I'd have these moments of like, oh man, I've just ruined the day. Like this is messing up everything. And definitely like even like as like social media manager for Be Caffeinated, those days of like, oh, I misspelled something on that post, and like 8 people saw that. This is terrible. Versus now like that happens and it's just part of doing it, Because we've seen we're like, that's just what's gonna happen every single day. There's gonna be accidents, there's gonna be mess ups, and you just have to accept that and be able to move on. So now like the crises are when like really when it's out of your control. It's kind of how I view like the crises now. Because stuff within our control, we've kind of figured out how to navigate them, I feel like. But when stuff like literally the weather is against you, is when it's like, well, crap.
Having also barista at Be Caffeinated, there's something that happens when you're in a rush and something goes wrong, and then everyone's freaking out. And honestly, in those times, I feel like whoever there has enough wherewithal to be like, okay, what needs to be done? And just take that 2 seconds to be like, what's wrong? What can we do about it? This is what we're gonna do. And a lot of times it's not even like necessarily the best solution. It's just that someone is willing to take a stand and say, this is what we're gonna do to fix this, let's go. And yeah, I think, on the barista side, it could be as small as I got the wrong drink out and now the whole line is messed up. Like, whose drink is what do we do? Oh my gosh, And then down to like, oh no, we sent out the wrong thing to 1,000 people and now we have to fix like a big problem. It's a big scale, but yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I also think there is that skill, like Chris is describing, of being able to, when there's like a crisis or, it might be a small incident in comparison now, but when something bad happens, being able to go, whatever, don't worry about it, we've got other stuff to deal with. Like you said with like the milk, I can definitely see where like early Nate, if 3 gallons of milk are on the floor, I'm telling customers like, we're closed, I gotta clean up all this milk, and that's not gonna help anything versus just going like, milk's on the floor, I'm stepping in milk, whatever. I gotta take care of these people.
Yeah, I think, and I might be jumping the gun here, but I think having a good understanding of what the priorities are kind of helps, and especially in a leadership role, if you're able to prioritize what needs to happen now and what can be pushed to later, what can be punted. So Be Caffeinated, or the coffee shop, we need to make coffee for people. If there's people in our line or people up front or whatever, they are the priority. Like you said, you wade through milk, you tie up your arm that you just cut off, like whatever it is, you get through the line. When there's a break, that's when someone like, hey, your job is to start cleaning, this person's gonna catch up on dishes, and that person takes the window to keep it going. And there's definitely a skill, like you said, in being able to take a step back, take a deep breath, and start directing people and prioritizing. And I agree, leadership isn't about making the best decision all the time, it's about making a decision when a decision needs to be made, and just pushing the ship forward. Otherwise it just either goes in a circle or it just stays in the water, just motionless, and nothing happens. And specifically as a barista, there are some crazy rushes where you're just like, what do I do? 27 shots need to be pulled, 17 milks need to be steamed, there's 4 frappes that are all different, they need bagels and pastries and muffins and whatever. How do I do it? And I think what we've done a good job at teaching our baristas is you do it one at a time. You like streamline and you try and do as many as you can, but you don't go wide if it affects your narrow stuff. So if you can steam more than 1 milks at a time, that's great. But if it affects just 1 at a time, you don't do that. You just do 1 ticket at a time. You keep going, and you prioritize the next person. Because if you get too far worried about the future, then you can't worry about what's going on right now. And I think our baristas have done a really good job at understanding that and prioritizing, and making sure that, if it gets really long, I've gotten a ton of compliments from people about our baristas that are like, I sat there for an extra 5 minutes, and your barista was like, sorry about that, here's a free drink for next time. So they understand, like, when they kind of get bogged down, it's okay to be like, hey, sorry about that, we got super bogged down, here's a free drink, or here's a discount for next time, or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, like, rushes are going to happen. You're going to mess up. It's not if, it's when. So just making sure you have a good mindset of, what do I do? What's the next steps? Making sure someone's in command. And then just steering the ship forwards and understanding what are the priorities. Because, like, the milk isn't a priority if it's all over the floor. Because you can still serve drinks. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I'm curious, what are some common types of crises that any business owner is likely to face in their journey? And especially if you can think back to some of your past times that really felt like true, like, business owner crises.
I got so many.
What is some advice, that you would give to your past self, that can help our people out there?
Man, so one of the lines I've told people is, if someone sat me down and was like, write a list of 100 things crazy or bad that you think could happen to your business, I would never write down the ones that have happened. We've had people throw rocks through our windows. We've had people break in and steal money and, like, paintings and stuff. We've had, like, some inappropriate shenanigans happening in parking lots whilst watching our employees. We've had to get cops involved. We've had to get, like, it's been crazy. And that's just the external. Weather is huge. COVID is huge. Our employees sometimes do really stupid stuff, and, like, dealing with that is important. We've had so many crazy things happen, and the bigger we get, the more crazy stuff goes on. And all you can do is just, like, take it in stride and try and make the best decision you can. Something Jasmine and I really like to talk about is called playing the table. It's a concept from poker, and it's basically when you have your hand and you see, the river in the middle, you play the best, you make the best decision that you can based on what's in front of you and what's in your hand. And then when they pull out the next card in the river, you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have bet, or oh, I should have bet more. You didn't have that information, so you have to play the table. So play what's out there. Hindsight is 20/20, and it doesn't do any good to look back and be like, man, I wish I'd done this. You just did the best you could with the information you had present. You're going to get more information later, but that doesn't matter. You just have to do the best you can at the moment. And so kind of that mindset of playing the table, it really helps to kind of stop looking back regretfully, or I should have done this. No, you should do what you think is best at the time, and then learn from it if it wasn't the best one, to have more information for later decisions.
Next.
Yeah. So I also, like Chris, there are so many things I've seen that we've learned from, and we never could have predicted. I think that's a big thing to know. It's just like, you're never going to be able to do it all. We're planning for the unplannable. But I think a big lesson we've learned that has helped is troubleshooting. And that's something we do not only at Beat Cafe, but also at Hive Think. And that's kind of like the whole process of, like, okay, we want to do X thing. Let's go through, like, the entire process before we even get a customer in front of us or anything like that. I know when we had Jeff Coffey on, you should listen to that episode, by the way, great episode. He actually talks about how they've done that for his company, and they encountered so many giant issues, like logistics issues, that they're able to resolve because they're able to go, okay, how do we get X thing to X location and all that. So I think that's a huge thing, is troubleshooting to try to, like, find those problems before they're surprising you. But yeah, you're never gonna get them all though.
Yeah.
And building systems into it too, for the troubleshooting, and starting from square zero. Like, if one of our baristas messages us and says, like, hey, our iPad's not working, the first question is, did you turn it off and back on again? Did you clear out of the app and turn? And we know they get frustrated with us, but like 7 out of 10 times it fixes it.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's like you have just protocols built into place, because, like you said, you can't know what's gonna happen, but you can have a SOP or, like, protocol for what to do to try and troubleshoot in those situations. And, like, we've had some crazy stuff happen on social media too, where one time I think one of us liked a post that someone, it was like super controversial.
Yes.
And it, like, put us on the wrong side of something, and, like, people were messaging us like, hey, what the heck, like, you support this? And we're like, whoa, and we don't even know who liked it. It was probably me that accidentally liked the post, and it was just more of it was Times Free Press, so I was just like, I don't know, liking it. But that was probably our worst PR thing we've done, where we just had to recover and, like, message those people. We're like, that's not what we meant. This is where we stand on this issue, blah, blah, blah.
Supporting a local
Yeah.
business. Yeah.
And all it was just literally, we didn't even like comment on the post and say, yeah, we just liked it. And people were like, excuse me? And we're like, oh no, that's not what we meant, And so it's just, it could be anything.
There's a lot of hidden anthills in the world of business.
Yes,
that you can
so many, which is why I'm such a strict, like, there is no place for politics in your business unless your business is politics, because that's just the whole bag of can of worms to get into that you shouldn't. So.
Yeah. So one, there's a thing we say in the world of like sound or video, button, knob, or switch. That 9 out of 10 times, the big problem of why everything's broken, nothing's working, and you've got like 1,000 people watching a big screen at like a college football game or whatever, and you're like, how do we get this working again? 9 out of 10 times, or you're like playing a show as a musician or whatever, 9 out of 10 times, you hit a dumb button, a dumb knob, or a dumb switch that you just have to be like, oh, we had the volume down. Okay, we didn't turn it off.
It happened to us at Coffee Break last week.
Yeah.
We couldn't get sound to come out of the speakers for our microphones, and our awesome photographer, videographer guy, Joshua, with Jam Sessions, dug into the back room and figured out that somehow the speakers had been turned off. So like everything was great, it was coming through, but for some reason it wasn't protected to the speakers. And he figured out there was just a button that had been hit accidentally and it turned off the speakers, and he fixed it. So
Exactly, and that's a technical thing that works, but it's also the mindset. It's what's the simple thing that's the solution that probably is just so simple. That's the thing that's overlooked.
And I try and utilize that mentality with people stuff too. So I love the minimum viable product MVP mindset from the Lean Startup book. What is the smallest action or thing we can do to fix this? Because if say, for example, we had some issues with morning safety for our openers. And so instead of doing this crazy process, we're like, all right, we're just going to have 2 openers come in instead of 1 opener come in. So they're extra safe. There's never just one person by themselves. We kept having issues with people and keys, and so we figured out a system to where everyone could have access to a key when they needed it. And so it's just like taking the simple things that fix the root cause instead of trying to fix the symptoms. Because a lot of people, I feel like, try and worry about the symptoms when if they just cut out the root cause, all those things wouldn't happen in the first place.
Yeah, 100%.
That makes it a lot easier over the long term.
Yeah. So something you said was really interesting to me about essentially simulating the full experience and what could go wrong, giving that chance to kind of experience it without experiencing it. It made me think a lot about NASA and how for them they have giant, humongous manuals of all the different things they could think of that could go wrong. And obviously there's things they couldn't expect, but there's chances are of the thousands of things it might be. And so if it pops up, it's like, we've never actually had to deal with this, but here's what we think we would do. And that's really, I think NASA is the extreme, right? For the rest of us, often isn't as dire at life and death. But I think that what you're saying is 100% right. Yeah,
and even if the problem that you're facing isn't exactly what you envisioned and thought was going to happen, just the fact that you have a plan of any sort, I think, can be so beneficial. You might not expect that at your event, someone's going to have some crisis happening like that, but you did plan for, hey, we know where the emergency exits are, or hey, we did plan for, here are the 2 people in charge who everybody needs to talk to, or something like that. So even if it isn't exactly what you envisioned, you've got something that you can build off of.
Yeah, on that note, so I'd say 2 years ago, it was probably the worst anxiety of my life. And every morning I'd wake up at 5:45 to my phone just blown up with this terrible things happen, we can't get in, blah, 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 blah. And every morning my adrenaline would just immediately spike. I'd immediately go into crisis management mode and my day would be shot. I cannot tell you the last time I woke up over the last couple months where I had to do that. Because someone's working on it. We have an awesome management team that acts like managers. We have an awesome general manager. Nate's our marketing manager on the BCAF side, and my business partner Doug, and we have a logistics person now. And just every time I go to answer somebody's question, it says so and so is typing. I'm like, all right. So I just delete what I was saying, and their answer is usually better anyways. I'm like, cool. And it's really nice, and my mental health is way better than it was because I don't have to worry while I'm asleep. What fires should I be putting out right now? And so, yeah, probably 2 years ago, we really started saying, like, as we're growing, how can we help with this? And so that's when we really started focusing on investing in our managers and our leadership team. We developed a very clear hierarchy of, like, barista has X thing happen. First, they reach out to whoever's lead on shift. If lead on shift doesn't know how to fix it, they reach out to next leadership, which is usually manager. If manager doesn't know how to fix it, they reach out to general manager, and then he either funnels to the correct person. So say it's like, operations, they point them to Doug. If it's logistics, they point them to like Jenna. If it's like marketing, they point them to Nate. And at the end of the day, if they don't know it, then I probably still don't know it, but they'll see like, hey, do you have an answer for this? And I'm either like, no, but let's figure it out. Or I'm like, yeah, I remember this one thing happened one time and this is how I fixed it at that point. But it's this awesome funnel to where we don't get bogged down by stuff that either they should figure out on their own or that someone else can help fix and part of their responsibility. So we can just focus on the business instead of focusing on being in the business. And that's been huge for us. Huge.
Yeah. What are some of the wrong mindsets or beliefs that people can have when facing crises, or that maybe that you had in the past? And then what's the better version that people can learn from, or maybe has been a growth point for you?
I definitely think I've seen the doom spiral before, which is where, kind of like Chris said, you can have those things of like, it feels like every time you get up or every time you're there, something bad is happening. And I've experienced that not just with B Cabinet, but other places too, where that can then put you in that mindset of like, why am I even doing this? And definitely like that mindset of like just doom and gloom, it's going to keep getting worse. And that's where the second, like, I feel like you have like people at the top saying that, it just leaks down. And we've seen that where it can spread, and before you know it, like nobody cares about quality anymore. It just leads to like giant deterioration in morale. And yeah, so I think that's a big one, is like don't fall into the doom spiral.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think on one side, kind of what Nate's talking about is like mindset and being negative oriented or positive oriented. Shifts can be tanked so quickly by someone with a bad attitude or in a bad mood, and it just bleeds really quick and it just spreads like a disease. And even worse, the next step of that is if a leadership person, like a manager or assistant manager, is overtly negative or toxic, and that just spreads. And we've had shops, entire shops before, where we're like, we don't know what to do right now. Like there was a period in which Doug and I literally felt unwelcome at one of our shops because everyone was so overtly negative and toxic, and like we just felt like we weren't allowed to be in our own business. And that's part of what caused this emphasis on management and on us investing so much into our leadership, is like we didn't like that feeling.
Yeah.
People didn't like working, and the whole reason we started was to make a spot where people liked going to work. And that just wasn't what was happening. And then on the other side, one of the worst mindsets you can have is the blame game. Like, whose fault was this? Like, why? Like, who messed up? Like, it doesn't matter. It should be, how do we fix this? How do we get it to the least, like, repercussions possible, and how we move on? And then later, when you're out of it and you're thinking clearly, you can be like, okay, how can we prevent this next time? It's not about whose fault is it. It's about how can we make sure as a team we don't let this happen again. The blame game just gets into this really bad mindset and a really bad like trickle down where it becomes fatalistic, and the business sinks and the morale sinks and people start not liking each other instead of like working together. So yeah, another reference for my wife and I, whenever we find ourselves fighting and like just like getting at each other's throats, one of us will be like, hey, we're on the same team. Like, this isn't, we don't actually care about it. Usually it's a semantics for like grammar or something. We're like, we don't actually care about this. This argument is stupid. We're just heated up right now. Yeah. We're on the same team. We'll take a step back and be like, you're right, I don't care about that. Or we'll go to the next and be like, what are we actually trying to convey to each other? What's the root emotion we're trying to get to? And just having that teamwork mindset and like, how can we do better instead of the competitive mindset of whose fault was this and who should we blame.
And your example, Chris, also kind of hints at something that I was thinking about that I think is another like mistake people make, and that is like, you've talked to me about this, the overcorrection. Because I could totally see someone in that situation of like, well, my shop's is turning against me, internalizing that, and instead of their reaction being, well, I need to better organize my shop, it being like, oh, I need to be there more, or like I need to take like a stronger hand, and stuff like that. And that
Or
just,
on the flip side, I'm there too much, and so I need to cut myself out, and then they're just never there.
exactly, yeah.
This is ultimately more reactionary than
Yep.
I'm doing things on purpose because I think they're the right thing to do.
It's attacking the symptom instead of the root cause.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we spoke really well to the blame game, but I think we need to go a little bit more on like what's the positive end of the doom spiral and how do people go from doom spiraling to having agency in those moments, whether it's in the micros and an employee or especially on the big scale as like a business owner.
I think on my end, as like an owner leader side, I try and bring levity to any situation I'm in. I think my goal is to one day master the like people stand up straighter when I walk in, but also smile. That's a quote from Unreasonable Hospitality of like what a good leader is. I want people to want to do better when I'm around, but I also want them to be excited when I'm around. The worst case scenario is they like dread me coming around. So the positive is when these bad things happen, making sure that people understand like the stakes. A wrong mocha instead of a shadow hooligan. So they're gonna be unhappy. If they come back, we'll fix it. But we should have like made such a like deep shoveled karmic, like they should have gotten so much from us already that they're like, you know what? It happens. They're awesome. I'll come back anyways. And that's why we ask in our interviews when we're interviewing our potential baristas, is it more important for a perfect cup of coffee or for a great customer experience? The answer we're looking for generally is great customer experience, because a bad cup of coffee is inevitably going to happen. It is just statistically impossible to never serve the wrong cup or a bad cup. So it's not about if that happens, it's about what you do when it happens. And if you've provided them that great experience, then they'll give you the chance to come back and fix it. Now, if you do that like 2 or 3 times in a row, that's on you. You deserve for them not to come back again. But as a leader, it's just making sure that people understand like the goal of this is to provide an awesome experience both for the employees and for the customers. And like, we're not worried about it. Something we tell new hires is like, we tell them those stories about when we've messed up so they know we're not looking for perfect. We're looking for, okay, I messed up, now what do I do? Like solution mindsets instead of problem mindsets. And then on shift, leadership, like we've had leaders in the past that they get into those doom spirals and they just sink the entire team. Good leaders now, it's okay if you kind of like tighten up a little bit and you're not as funny or like you're not as like not as positive, but it still should be trending towards positive and like building up instead of like some of the times people will get very snappy and like a little angry and I don't know, just too intense.
Yeah.
Intensity is okay, but there's a line where it's like, it's coffee. Like,
Yeah,
coffee.
it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So as someone who's been like the employee in those situations sometimes where like the people around you are in that doom spiral, I think a big thing that helps is kind of like the step back. Like this sounds very cliche, but you really can kind of lose the forest for the trees whenever like you're in those situations where like people around you are saying lots of negative things. Like I've definitely had that moment of like, someone's telling you something going on, you're like, that's terrible. Wow. I see why you're angry or like why you're so upset, and you start to feed into it and you get caught up in like the drama.
Yeah.
you can get caught up in that element of it, or 2, kind of like the workplace politics, which I mean, those 2 often collaborate, but still, you can get caught up into that, or, just people can exaggerate, and it's easy to then fall into the spiral with them of like, you're so right, this is outrageous, how is this going on? When if you really like take the step back and go like, okay, wait, so what's the problem here?
Yeah.
You have that moment of like, this isn't adding up, what they're saying isn't computing with how we do things here, or it sounds like people are saying things that might be untrue.
Yep.
So I think that's really important, and that can be, I think, really important from like the owner side too. It's like when we're having those doom spirals. I know like you've had like long talks with Michael before and stuff like that, like how do I get organized? And that's something where I think talking to someone who wasn't directly involved with it was super helpful, getting that like outsider perspective.
I think too, playing off of that, as a leadership team, building that rapport with your people so that if something happens that they perceive as bad, they are the ones that are like, this isn't like all of my other experiences with this person, so I think I might be wrong, or like something else is happening. And that's why it's so important to have that like radical candor with people and to have that open line of communication. Our general manager, Tyler, is a great example of, he's a Spitfire, he's intense, he's like ex-military, so he's just like, rah, 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 you know.
Sometimes literally.
And when he first came on, he turned off a lot of people and like butted heads with a ton of people. And we butted heads a lot. We'd have like yelling matches at each other while we were trying to meet. And I eventually understood that like his method of communication was just completely different than most people's. And so I was able to start like translating, we call it Tyler's apocalypse brain, into what he's actually meaning and what he's actually trying to convey. And then he like inherently loves serving people and cares about people. So he just kept doing his thing, and eventually people kept seeing his actions, and they were like, his actions don't match his words. Maybe his words are just different than what he's trying to actually say.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of like karma that as a leader you should be like providing, is they should question my words if I say them wrong because of my past actions. And then on the flip side, like if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, Tyler's being a jerk, I'm like, well, yeah, he is a jerk sometimes. Let's talk about what he said. And they're like, well, he said this. It's like, is it true? They're like, well, I'm like, well, okay. Like he was an asshole about it, but
Sometimes
it's true.
it's true, yeah.
Or I'm like, well, either he meant this or he spoke out of turn or he like misspoke or whatever. So I'm like, have you talked to him about it? Like, well, no. I'm like, why are you coming to me first? Just go and talk to the guy. And so we've tried to build that like communication oriented mindset now, where instead of going to another person, they go to the person that's wronged them and be like, hey, this is really silly, you hurt my feelings. That one line goes so far, especially in an environment where people care about each other. If you say that, like, it doesn't matter if you didn't mean that or didn't mean it for it to come out that way. That's how they took it. That was their reality. Perception is reality. So then you say, I'm sorry that it came out that way. This is what I meant, but I understand you're upset. I want you to feel better. How can we get there? That's all it takes. And so many times, these things that explode and get really big could have been just solved immediately if they'd just been like, hey, Nate, when you said that my pants were too purple, that hurt my feelings. And you're like, what I meant was like, they're not maroon enough. And I'm like, oh yeah, because you're a, whatever fan. That makes sense. Oh, we're friends again.
Yeah.
And that's a gross example. Like,
I
just
love
in
that.
general. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think what you're talking about is really kind of where my brain was at as well. Like, think about even that's like relational crisis.
Yeah.
But even down to like, let's just stick with the busy shift of a barista. When I was feeling overwhelmed at some point, like, oh my gosh, there's more drinks that are going on than I know what to do, and there's some people that label them, and I can't tell which one's which, and now what do we do? The thing that I leaned on more than anything else was communication, like over communication. And that's one of the things I realized, that the bad mindset is that I have to struggle in this overwhelm alone. And even down to the micro of like coming into a shift and saying, I am really tired, my head hurts, I would prefer not to be on window. Can someone else, talk to the customers unless it's an emergency?
Instead of suffering in silence
And then
doing
pissed
it
off.
because you feel like you have to,
Yeah.
and then building resentment when you could have just said, hey, my head hurts. And they'll be like, oh yeah, totally, I've been there.
Exactly. And it's just that little extra step of saying like, this is what I feel, this is what I would like, is that okay? Or, and it pretty much exactly what you're saying, especially if it's the hurt feelings.
Yep.
Which I think this kind of segues really nicely into the next question I have for you. So we've talked kind of mindset and we've shared some experiences. Let's go super tactical. And so I want to break it down. What are some of your like go-to tactical moves? We'll do two categories: stuff crisis and people crisis.
Yeah, so I think the biggest one, and this is just the overall answer, is like consume books, podcasts, etc. Because there's people out there that have gone through it before. One of my dad's quotes that I love is like, learn from other people's mistakes and not your own. Ideally, you don't have to make the mistake to learn from it or to prevent it. But also, if you make the mistake, your goal should be to never make it again and learn from it. But I mean, we started Be Caffeinated when I was 24 or 25. I didn't know what I was doing. I had a couple degrees in business, but they were degrees in how to be a cog in a corporate machine, not how to be a real business owner. And like, half of being a business owner is just relationships and leadership and people management. And I didn't have any of that. I mean, I was a manager for like 10 months at Java Mos. It was probably even less than that. That was it. So I went from that to being an owner with Doug and us being like, what do we do? And then we hired 5 employees. Then we had 15, and now we're at like 50 plus. And each scale is different. And the whole time I could either just try and figure it out, or I could read and listen to what other people had done when they were doing it and try and glean as much information from them so that I could just go ahead and start ahead instead of trying to catch up. So like proactive versus reactive. I think that's stuff and people. I loved listening, and I still do, How I Built This with Guy Raz, the podcast. That was great for both. Just listening to these incredibly successful entrepreneurs that everyone's heard of that had really hard times of it, and listening to how they figured it out, how they did it, listening to them be like, I thought I was going out of business, and then I just pulled it out of my ass. Like, cool. We've been there, you know?
Yeah.
We're still pulling it. It's like a little clown magician thing, pulling it out of there, but, you know, we're going for it. But, yeah, why would you learn it from your own mistakes when you could learn it from somebody else's? And then just, like, understanding who you are as a person and who you are as a business and what your priorities are. We've brought on a couple people that we knew were going to be hard to deal with, and we were like, no, we can do it. And it was way too early in the life of the business because we didn't have the support structure we could provide for them, and we didn't have the resources, and we shouldn't have done it. Do I regret it? No. I'm glad we tried. I would have regretted not trying it. But like at this stage, even now, we still probably wouldn't have quite enough resources to support the people. So just knowing who you are, why you exist, what you're going for, and then trying to learn as much from other people, communities, networking, learn from other people around you. I had meetings with Jason Bowers, who owns like the local like civil provisions and Clever and Daily Rush and all that. I asked him how he handled employees. I had a phone call one time with the guy that owns Java Mos. I was like, hey dude, how do you tell people that you don't want to hire them even when you want to hire them? Because it was like a really big hiring batch, and I just had so many good candidates. I was like, I want these people on my team, but it just doesn't fit the like availability needs or the hours or, you know, whatever it is. And those are the hardest emails to send because I genuinely can see them be an awesome addition to our team. It just doesn't work right now. So yeah.
To kind of summarize that, what I got from that was, generally speaking, to get better moving forward, learn from others broadly, reading, podcasts, everything else. And then more tactically, if you have either people or logistics problems, one of the best things you can do is reach out to someone that's already been through it and learn from them on your specific problem that you're dealing with right then.
Yep. Yeah, we've I was even talking this morning to Kendra from Poppyton's Patisserie. I mentioned that we were thinking about getting into croissants at the bakery, and she said, do you want us to teach you how to make croissants? I was like, hell yeah, I do.
Yeah.
She's like, cool. So
yeah,
it's as easy as that. And instead of us trying to figure out and struggle and do all this stupid stuff and throwing away croissants, they're gonna just come in and be like, hey, this is how you do it.
That's nice. Awesome. What about you, Nate?
Yeah, so I'll follow what Chris said and kind of do one that I think can apply to both, and that's to like listen and watch. So I think a lot of times, like from like the stuff angle and dealing with that stuff, like Chris is saying, you can like really learn a lot by just looking at what's going on and try learning from your mistakes. But also like when we're in those rushes and stuff like that, it's very easy to get into the mindset of like almost like frenzy, you know, of just there's 80 things we gotta do. Let's just start doing them, you know. You're throwing shots with one hand while you're washing a pitcher with the other hand. The shots are coming out wrong. The pitcher's not getting washed properly.
What was your biggest criticism when you started as a barista at Be Caffeinated from upper management? Do you remember?
I don't know. What was it?
It was your speed.
Yeah.
You were just like, you were literally
I figured it was the
running
speed.
places.
Yeah.
You were like,
oh, I remember the milk.
Yep.
The milk was like, it doesn't matter if I'm building all the milk spills. Yeah.
Yep.
I remember you literally saying that,
Yeah.
Which we love the enthusiasm. We're like, just slow and steady. Fast as smooth and smooth as fast.
Exactly. Yeah. And now I've learned like it very much is like a focus on like looking at what's going on around you. I think that can apply to a lot of situations where you can get into that mode of, and I still do this, where you get into that mode of like, let's just get it done right now, you know, let's do it. And by just doing it, you're missing out on opportunities, you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. You know, maybe one of the other 4 people in the kitchen could wash the pitcher while you pull the shot. Yeah, and then from the person side, like I said, listening is super important. I think it's very easy to feel defensive and to feel like you need to retort and like you need to like make your case heard whenever you're in those situations. Like I didn't like like you said that thing of like I don't like your red pants. It'd be very easy to go like, well, I didn't mean it like that, in like an aggravated way of, and get into like that defensive posture versus just explaining like, listening first and then going like, I'm sorry, and just moving on from it. Yeah, so listen more than you talk. I think that's like a very big lesson that lots of folks should focus on.
As they say in the South, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
I've never heard that one. I like that one.
Wow, yeah.
That's great.
From my down south Mississippi.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think to finish that thought too is like, I think that's why it's so important to be really picky about the team that you have. I've run into in the past where I've hired people that I shouldn't have hired because I had hours I need to fill.
Yeah.
Don't do that. It never works out.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like, I don't really think this person's going to be a good fit. Why are you even still interviewing them? Why are you talking to them? At this point, we are in a fortunate position to where we get to be super picky. We have amazing candidates. Like this most recent round, there were so many people where I was like, I don't want to tell you no, but it just comes down to availability, yada, yada. There's just these magic words that I hear in the interviews. Like my favorite one that's automatically like they're at least somewhat in the next round is they say, I had such a good experience in your drive-through where people made me feel valued and seen and like I mattered. Now I want to do that for other people. That is automatically like, okay, like you are now like extra brownie points.
Yeah.
And if that's the type of people you're attracting and you're building up, then when someone says, hey, I didn't like that you said my pants were pure purple or red, they're going to be like, oh my God, I'm sorry. This is what I meant. And you just have that, like, everyone is there to support each other and like to have that camaraderie. And like, that's probably one of the worst things they can imagine is that someone would take their purple pants comment and be sad about it. They're like, oh my God, purple's my favorite color. Red's whatever it is, So like if you just have that team orientation where people are trying to support each other, then they're not gonna be defensive at first. Hopefully they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like I'm sorry, or that mindset of let's work together, let's fix this, let me explain what I meant, but also I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings and I see you, value you, want you to feel that I'm seeing those feelings that you had. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to tactical tips for stuff, I feel like I like taking the moment to say, okay, this has gone wrong, and asking the question, what's the real problem? What's the root cause? And then coming up with a list of ideas they're not decisions. You don't have to commit to them, but you come up with as many ideas as you can of how you might fix it, and then you essentially like internally score it and say, I feel like this has the highest likelihood, that's the easiest to do, let's try that one first, and then essentially if that doesn't work, you already have a list of other things to try. And the big thing a list in the moment of crisis can do for you is it can start to generate your ideas of, essentially you're creating optimism. If you're writing down ideas, you're writing little bits, little jolts of hope that things could be improved, that you could fix the situation, and then it gives you something to do. It gives you a plan of attack, something that you can rally the team and say, this is what we're doing. And guess what? If that doesn't work, we have 9 more things to try. And that's really powerful. That's really like motivating to like start building momentum to fix the problem. And then when it comes to people, I think the biggest thing I've found, and I think we kind of have skirted around it in different parts of this conversation, but to go super tactical, this is literally what I say. Chris has heard this before.
This might be weird.
Yeah, this might be weird as one. That's actually part of it. But essentially, one of the biggest things is saying, like, my intent with this conversation is blank. And if you say, like, my intent with this conversation is, I want us to be whole at the end of it, both feel happier and feel good about the plan moving forward to resolve XYZ, feelings we have, then most often people can handle any accidental things that would kind of offend them throughout it and say, essentially, this is where this might be weird comes in, or this might be whatever. It's like, hey, if you set up the intent from the beginning, I want us to be good at the end of this and feel happy about each other and moving forward, Then you can say, okay, now these are the things, these are the issues, or these are the solutions or problems I'm going to present, and you say, this might offend you, but I'm hoping for this. And you still throw it out anyways. That kind of creates the frame of the game of a conversation with people, so that you both are moving towards the same goal instead of fighting against each other, which is very much similar to what you're saying with you and Jasmine.
I guess you could call that the why of the conversation.
Start with why. Start with why. Right there, Simon Sinek.
That's also huge in the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the framing is very important, and then also having that rapport. The first chapter is whenever she gave this like presentation when she was in beginning her corporate thing. She was really excited about it, and she like thought she crushed it. And she was walking with her boss. Her boss was like, "Hey, you say too much." She was like, "What the hell?" And then that kind of built this thing, and eventually she was like, "Oh, I do say but having that rapport so that when someone says, "Hey, you say too much," you're like, "Oh, they're saying this out of like wanting me to be better, not out of wanting to attack me."
You get all the defensive stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to build that rapport first.
Yeah.
That is the important, and that's what a lot of people skip.
Yeah.
They think they can just come in and be like, "Hey, your pants are purple." Whoa. But if you've been talking about pants for a while, you're like, "They are purple, thank you."
Yeah.
And I think too, another tactical thing that we've experienced is if two people have an issue, having a mediator in the meeting. So like it's cool to have like, this is my intent from the conversation. But some people sometimes are just oil and water, or it's so heated or it's so intense that having a third party in there that's either unbiased or is like leadership is super beneficial. I'm usually the mediator in a lot of those meetings, either on a disciplinary side or just two people, can't talk right now, but there needs to be a conclusion. I'm like, "Hey guys, I'm gonna throw you in a room, lock the door, and be in there with you and make you talk and until you or make you sit there until you talk." And then it works.
Yeah. That's great. Any final words, if you have a final bit of advice for people, or you just want to give them some encouragement that maybe they're going through a crisis right now and they just need a little pick-me-up?
Try and think a year ago. Can you remember many details? No. In a year, it'll be the same. So like whatever big giant thing is going on right now, it's probably going to end. It can still suck. It does suck, but like you'll get not over it, but you'll get through it. It'll be okay. A lot of the things that I thought were the end of the world, I don't even remember anymore. And that's why it's so important to play the table, to go into all of your conversations with a mindset of, I want to like make sure everyone is respected out of this. I want to make sure everyone gets what they need out of this. And I want to make sure that everyone understands we're on the same team and we're not fighting each other. And then playing the infinite game. Simon Sinek wrote a book called Infinite Game. It's talking about, we're not doing this for this month. We're not doing this for this year. We're doing this for life. Whether or not decaffeinated exists forever, it probably won't. But like things keep going. If we win the best coffee shop, next year it'll be someone else, or it could be 10 years from now, it could be someone else. You need to be focusing on what is the why, what is the purpose, what am I trying to do that's good, how am I improving the world, instead of like, how do I make the most money, how do I be the most profitable, how do I do the best for right now. It's like you're constantly doing better, you're constantly improving. How can I be better today than I was yesterday? Because in a year, everything from today is just in the past. So just go through it. It's not the end of the world. Set yourself up with a supportive team and network and community, and still help you get through it better.
Take a deep breath, just if you can, chill out, focus on the fact that this will pass, as all things do. There's gotta be a tomorrow. I can't top Chris. Damn it, that was too good. Everything I think of, it's like he said that. It really is just focusing on the fact that like this will pass and that you're going to get through it. That's the big thing that I've had to like tell myself a lot of times in crises and issues, is that whole idea of like, this isn't forever. This isn't how it's always going to be. Sometimes you can think about that even in like the good times, and that's something important I think to keep in mind, is that when you're at the top, you're not always going to be at the top. Be ready for that when you're going down. But I don't know. That's it though. Yeah. Cut it wherever you want. But
Great.
I agree. I have a quick one that I just thought about. I was super messed up by sending messages out when I've been high emotion, whether it's like really mad or really excited or anywhere in between. I've said the meanest and worst things based on reaction messaging when I should have just like, if I ever find myself like, blah, 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 I'm like, uh-oh. And I just delete everything I typed, put my phone away, and I go somewhere for like 15 minutes and then I come back to it. Or if it's like a really big thing, I make myself sleep on it. I won't send it that day. I'll make myself go tomorrow. Because tomorrow, things from yesterday are like, why was I that bad? But like when it's in the moment, it feels so bad. And I have such like anger issues from like middle school, where if something really gets me going, especially if it's like someone messing with people I really care about, vindictive Christopher comes out, and that's really dangerous. And I say things that I don't mean, and I'm like, wow, that's the meanest thing anyone could ever say. Like, your pants are purple, they're indigo. You know,
I love that we keep going.
but yeah, just like yours, take a deep breath and just like don't respond until you feel like you're in a medium point. Especially as a leader, something that one of Jasmine's old bosses said to her one time was, as a leader, you don't get to feel extreme emotion. Well, you can feel them, but you can't express them. You always have to be moderate. You can't get too excited. You can't get too mad, because that's just like not great leadership. You just have to be in the middle to run a good team. And I think that's like not completely true. I think you should like enjoy the victories with your team, but at the same time, like you said, Nate, just because you're at the top now, by definition, you can't always be at the top.
Yep.
Because then it's not the top. Then it's just valid. So, yeah, take a deep breath. It'll get better.
Yeah.
Or it won't. You
You don't know.
don't know.
Yeah, I think that I've got two things. One is finding a way to get a state change is really huge. So that whether this is, if I go talk to a friend that knows this world, will I feel better afterwards? Most likely yes, because they're going to be able to have perspectives that you don't and show you that it's going to be okay. And equally, if you're finding a state change, it might not even be reaching out to a friend. It might be, I've been feeling bad in my office facing the same problem over and over and over again. Go for a damn walk. You go for a walk, see some trees, feel some air, touch some grass, you will be in a different state, literally physically, but probably also mentally, because you switched it up. And you can do
My
this-
state change was Mississippi to Tennessee.
Yeah. That'll do it. Oh, I didn't get it. Good boy. So that's a really big one. And so you can do that a billion different ways. Go get an ice cream, talk to a friend. If you haven't played a video game in a year and you're like, hey, you know what? I really like video games and I'm stressed out, play a video game. Whatever it takes, right? Different state change.
Boxing.
Boxing. Yeah.
Such a
Huge.
good state change.
Yeah.
I would beat the out of some boxing.
Yeah. Okay, so that's like one final bit of advice on that. And the other one is this. This is not for everyone. Try it for yourself one time, and if it works for you, great. If not, I'm sorry. But this is, I think I got this from Tim Ferriss. If I didn't, oh well, it's good to credit him anyways. And the idea is to essentially ask yourself, what is the worst that could happen? And go there.
Yep.
And really figure out, like, okay, I imagine I'm Chris. I'm going to be caffeinated. What if Be Caffeinated went out of business? Well, that would really suck. It would hurt. Lots of people would lose their jobs, all these other things. It's a bunch of bad stuff, right? But you're probably going to still have a place to live, still going to have food, and you'll have learned so much. And it'll be like, okay, so I'll probably feel bad for a while, and then I'll get a new idea to do something else. I'll get really excited about it. I'll have learned so many things that I can do an even better version of XYZ next time. And yeah, actually, the worst that could happen is sucky, but not infinitely horrible, the worst thing ever. And that right there is like really empowering, because just like in a video game, you feel like maybe there's a little bit of stakes because you don't want to lose your progress or whatever, have to do the same level again. But you can just do it as many times as you want. Now, life is more serious, like there's more risk. But if you really think about what the worst thing is, and it's something you could recover from in a month or 2 or 3 easily, like there's no doubt that you'd be like, yeah, I would just go get a different job. I would, save up some money. I would go do something else. That right there can give you power. So.
No, my Jasmine wife sometimes has like anxiety stuff, and I'm just like, I'll ask that question. What is the worst that could happen? And she'll say this, and they're like, no, that can't happen. Or I'll be like, yeah, that's the worst that could happen. The field of possibilities are from there all the way to the best that could happen. And it's going to be somewhere in the middle, most likely.
Yeah.
That's a really good perspective frame. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Guys, thanks so much for sticking in with this episode. My name's Michael Orzabal.
Chris Wood.
Nate Tucker.
This has been Zero to Hero, and we'll see you next time.
Kisses.